we are doing my first wrap-up video for the year, one of many. December is just lists like whoa here on the channel. And I always kick off this whole thing with my best and worst series of the year tag, because in the hustle and bustle of calling out individual books that I enjoyed reading this year, I found that I was sometimes not talking about my series reading for the year. And since I am a genre fiction reader, I would say my three biggest genres that I read are mystery, thriller, sci-fi, or fantasy, and romance in its many forms. There's a lot of series out there that I read, and this tag is a way for me to be able to highlight some of the best and worst of that reading for the year. And I always enjoy kind of checking in and seeing how I did. I'm also this year going to be including some alternate questions, because I realized that my original drafting of the questions was assuming you had a pretty good year. And I'm gonna say that especially series that I finished was not as strong as some of my other years. So I'm going to be including a couple of alternative questions just to help people out. There's already 17 questions, so I probably can just slow my roll, but whatever, we're just going with it. Oh, and I also challenged myself this year to not do any repeats of series for answers to questions. Okay, question one is, what is the best series that you caught up with this year that is still a work in progress? Meaning you are caught up with what has been officially released, but there are still books to come. And I'm going to say that the Innkeeper Chronicles is what I would call my best work in progress series that I caught up with. I was behind by 2 books, and there is another one coming out. I think when you guys are seeing this, it will be next week. I should say that this is an interesting series in terms of how it's published, because it is serialized on the Ilona Andrews website, but they then edit and compile the serialization into a book, and that's the form in which I personally choose to read that series. So I count the entries once they get officially published. So I will not be caught up as of next week, but as of this filming, I am caught up. So yeah, this is a really cozy sci-fi story with a strong romantic element. I think it's a good bridging series for sci-fi readers interested in romance, or romance readers interested in sci-fi. And Ilona Andrews always makes me laugh. I really like their humor. It's very dry and kind of absurdist, but their world building is what I really love. This is a series that is presupposing that Earth is the Atlanta airport of the galaxy, and so we are neutral, but all of these different species come and stay at these inns, and there are these supernaturally powerful innkeepers who can keep everybody from getting into trouble. And, you know, shenanigans ensue from there. It's just a great series, and I'm really glad that I did a reread and a catch-up this year. Oh, and I should mention that it is the series I am doing for season 2 of my podcast, which is called Changeling Cast. It's on all the different platforms, and then I also have a playlist of a YouTube version if you just want to catch it on YouTube. Question 2 is, what is the best work in progress series that you are still catching up with? And I wanted to mention that alternatively, you could say, what is a series that might be finished, but that you're still catching up with? So if it was going to be that, I would have said Realm of the Elderlings overall is definitely the best series that I'm catching up with that I'm reading right now. But in terms of a series that is still ongoing, in terms of new entries being published that I need to catch up with, is the I Married a Blank series, which is a romance series, a sci-fi romance series that basically is all marriage of convenience, and it is human women with whatever species. So there's basically, like, the first one was called I Married a Lizard Man, to give you a sense. And they're actually always surprisingly really sweet. There's a lot of very awkward alien-human encounters, and it's a lot about cross-cultural romance, basically. I like the world building. I like some of the political machination things that happen of why different people are needing a marriage of convenience. And I'm behind one. I need to read I Married a Dragon Man. But it's one that I definitely would count as always a pleasure to catch whatever the latest entry is. So that's from Regina Abel, and I just think that's a super fun sci-fi romance series. Okay, and then what is your favorite first book in a series this year? And I just realized the top of this list is very romance heavy. So interesting, considering I didn't feel like this was a very strong romance reading year for me, but Well, come on now. Where is it? Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare, who also writes under the pen name Ruby Dixon, which is, you know, she's definitely had a moment the last couple of years. But this is her new paranormal series with Berkeley under her Jessica Clare pen name. And it's witches, and I just love the way she writes her books. They're always really funny, and it tends to be a lot of himbos. This particular series seems to be a take on a Kylo. You can even tell on the cover that this guy kind of looks like Adam Driver. And anyway, I just think that the dynamic is really fun. I like that trope. I like this world. There's another one coming out in the spring. I already have an advanced copy of it, so I'm looking forward to reading it. But yeah, this was my favorite new series that I enjoyed the first entry in this year. The next question is, what is a first book in a series you read this year that you think should have just been a standalone and not a series? So this is only a duology so far, I believe, but I think Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri holds up perfectly well as a standalone. And I've actually heard that the sequel is not as good, so I don't think I'm gonna read it, and I'm just gonna treat this like a standalone. I think that this has a full and complete story arc to it. I don't think need to keep going. I mean, you can if you want to, I guess. But for me, I actually really like this as a standalone, and that is how I am going to treat it. This is a high fantasy set in a Southern Asian inspired world, and it's got a lot to do with religion is kind of the overriding plot elements. But yeah, I thought this was great as a standalone, so that would be my answer. What is your most overhyped series of the year? I'm gonna say Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. That was one that I read because of TikTok, to be totally honest. It was everywhere, and then it was getting the big tour release, so, you know, I thought I would check it out. I thought that this was horribly overwritten, and I could not even finish the first book. So, for me, very overhyped. I've been hit or miss on my reading from TikTok. Sometimes I think they get it right, a la Ruby Dixon, and sometimes I think they get it wrong, a la the Atlas 6. The next one is, what is a series you DNF'd this year? Ooh, okay. So I feel really bad that I'm DNFing this, and I'm holding out hope that I'll get in the mood to do a binge at some point, but for now I'm saying that I'm DNFing the Scythe trilogy. I got about a quarter of the way through Thunderhead and was like, I just don't care about this anymore. I really enjoyed the first book, but I think I waited too long in between books, and I just kind of lost momentum and steam and just couldn't really be bothered. So I feel bad about this, but for now I'm DNFing this little dystopia trilogy. So number 7 is, what is your favorite series finale of the year? And then I'm gonna do a flip side and say, what is your least favorite series finale of the year? Because I honestly had far more answers for that than I did favorite. My answer for favorite, I decided, was going to be Ruby Fever by Ilona Andrews. I don't know that this really counts though, because it is the finale of this particular trilogy, but it's pretty clear we're gonna get another trilogy. And I kind of think of the Hidden Legacy series as kind of like Realm of the Elderlings, where yes, there are individual series, but really they read as one overarching story. So I guess this would be my favorite if I was just gonna think of the second trilogy of Catalina's series as its own thing. But I had far more answers for finales I did not like. Okay, I thought I pulled it, but I guess I didn't. The Final Gambit, which was the finale of the Inheritance Game trilogy, I think that for me, that series really peaked in the first book, and the second two were really not that great. They were fine. I gave them both 3 stars, but disappointing considering how much I love Jennifer Lynn Barnes and how much I love the way that the Natural series ended. Like, I know she can do an ending, and this just was not it. I also felt like Flamebringer from L. Catherine White. This is a trilogy starting with Heartstone. Again, Heartstone is far and away the strongest of the 3. So in both of those trilogies, I think the first book is the strongest. And this one is probably the least successful of the 3. Not that necessary. Like, I think that you should just read Heartstone as a standalone, and then if you just really love the world like I did and you want to spend more time in it, keep going. But otherwise, I think both of the sequels are pretty lackluster, all things considered. And then the other disappointing finale was from the Fireblood Dragon series from Ruby Dixon, because it just felt like it went out with a whimper, and I was so excited for the villain to have a story, but it just, I don't know. I think that the chemistry was off between him and his heroine, and a very satisfying ending to that series, which I think kind of started rocky for me, got really good, and then just sort of like petered out, unfortunately. So yeah, that was disappointing as well. Number 8 is, what is the biggest cliffhanger you had in a series? And I don't know if this is, I guess this is a cliffhanger, but in terms of a series where when it left off, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to see how that's going to get handled in the next book. I went with the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. There are 3 books in this trilogy, and the way that this ends, even though I'd kind of predicted what was going to happen in this particular book, in terms of sort of what the like secret of this book is, I really thought that the ending was very intriguing and has some really interesting suggestions about where the trilogy could go from here. And I have no idea where the trilogy is going to go. So I was very intrigued by the ending of this and felt like, ooh, that kind of leaves a lot of possibilities on the table there, NK. I need to make a plan to finish this next year, finish the series, but I thought this was a really suspenseful ending. Okay, and then number 9 is, what is your favorite spin-off series that you read this year? And I decided to go with an inspired by spin-off. So I decided I would go with the Marple short story collection. You know, I went into this decently skeptical because I wouldn't say that the Sophie Hannah version of the full Poirot novels felt very Poirot-ish to me. This I thought was a really good approach to Marple because it's a bunch of different authors giving their take on the Marple character. Lots of different little fun mysteries, some of them pretty directly inspired by a book in the main series, some going a totally different direction. And I just thought that this was a lot of fun. So it's kind of an unconventional version of a spinoff, but this is what came to mind when I was thinking of series spinoffs. And then, what is your most anticipated next book in a series that you read this year that will come out next year? So basically, you're reading in the series, there's a new book coming out next year, and you can't wait for it. And that certainly the Between Earth and Sky series from Rebecca Roanhorse. Black Sun is one of my all-time favorite books. I really like the sequel, which I know is somewhat mixed in its reception. It's definitely a middle book in the sense of it is putting chess pieces back on the board. And I will say that the more time passes, the less this one feels impactful to me. But when I was reading it, it was just giving me all of the delight that I had. Not all, but it gave me a lot of the same feels from Black Sun. And then where it leaves off, because it is so much of a sort of scene-setting book, where it leaves off, I think, is really exciting, and I cannot wait for the finale next year. Okay, and then what is your most anticipated series to catch up with next year based on what you read in that series this year? And I didn't really have an answer for this. So I thought that I would do an alternative question, which is, what is a series that became an auto read for you based on what you read this year? And I picked 2 for that. One I would say is The Singing Hills cycle by Niveau. I read all 3 of the books this year, and I really enjoyed all of them. The middle one, which is When the Tiger Comes Down the Mountain, is probably my favorite, followed by this, followed by Empress of Salt and Fortune, believe it or not. I like all of them. I've given all of them 4 stars, and I think it just is setting itself up to be a reliable, short fantasy series that I'm going to continue to really enjoy. So I think this is a new auto read. And then the Mead Mishap series from Kimberly Lemming is a very cheeky, funny fantasy romance series that I very much enjoyed. It's very campy and self-aware in a way that's very fun for me, and it's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's just begging to be binged. Okay, and then what is your favorite series that you finished this year? This was a really hard question for me because again, this goes back to kind of what we were talking about with the Ruby Fever one, where I don't really consider the Live Ship Traders to be fully a series on its own. If I did, unquestionably Live Ship Traders was my favorite series of the year and my favorite thing I finished. Mad Ship is my favorite of those. So I guess that's the answer. If we're talking about a series that is more of its own thing, well, but now that I'm saying it, it's also in the Rubyverse. I would say the Corsairs series from Ruby Dixon. I really particularly liked the finale of that, but it is, now that I'm saying that, it's very integrated into the rest of the Rubyverse and where that's going. But that would probably be between those 2 halfway counting answers, I feel like we got a full answer. What was your favorite episodic series of the year? Well, I feel like I have to give that to my first season of the podcast, which was the Side Changeling series from Nalini Singh, and the latest one, Storm Echo, came out this year. It was good, guys. It was really good, and it leaves in such an interesting place. I cannot wait for next year to find out what happens next. And I've absolutely loved doing the podcast on these series because it makes me think about them more deeply, and that is always very fun. 14 is, what is a series that you finally bailed on after holding out for a long time? And I think the answer to that has to be The Witchlands by Susan Dennard, because kind of similar actually to what I realized with Scythe. I realized that if I was going to enjoy the Witchland series, I was going to need to wait until they all came out, and then I would need to start back with Sight Witch and read through, because there's so many Easter eggs and there's so much foreshadowing stuff that I think is what makes Witchlands a really exciting thing to read. And I just realized that I'm no longer interested enough in the series to commit the time to go back, do a reread of the first like 4 books that I read in it, and then read the last like 4 books that I haven't read. So I finally bailed on the Witchland series, not because it's bad, but just I think for me to enjoy it would require more time and effort than right now I foresee myself doing any time in the near future. And then 15 is, what is the series you were most surprised that you liked this year? And I decided to go with the Susan Ryland series by Anthony Horowitz. This is a mystery. I actually DNF'd I did a soft DNF on the first book, which was Magpie Murders, because I wasn't in the right mood to read it when I started it. And so I kind of thought like, okay, I need to go ahead and read Magpie Murders so that I can just essentially say like, yeah, I definitely don't want to read this. And then I started reading it last Christmas and was like, holy crap, I love this. This is so good. And there's only 2 books out in it so far, but it is just my kind of mystery. So I was surprised that this ended up being a 4.5, and then this was a 5-star book. So I would not have had that on my bingo card when I DNF'd Magpie Murders initially. Also a reminder to me of why it's good to do a soft DNF and come back to things later when you're in the right mood. And then the last 2 bonus ones. What is a series that you meant to catch up with or finish this year that you didn't? Heroes of Olympus. I meant to finish that this year, and I don't think that that's gonna happen. I do think I'll make some more progress in it, but I don't think I'm gonna end up finishing it, but I will definitely finish it by February because that is the deadline I gave myself. So that was my answer for that one. And then bonus number 17 was, what is a series you finished this year that you think is greater than the sum of its parts? Alternative question is gonna be, what's a series you caught up with that you think is greater than the sum of its parts? And that continues to be Monstrous for me. I don't know that I've ever given an individual volume of Monstrous more than 4 stars, but the series as a whole is unquestionably a 5-star series for me. I absolutely love this world. The art is beautiful. I actually have a new series called The Night Eaters I just got from this author and artist pairing because I love their imagination together in terms of the storylines and the art merging. It's just wonderful, and this series is definitely bigger than the sum of its parts for me. So that was my series tag for this year with some alternative questions. Like I said, I felt like I had some kind of misses this year on series, but I also got a lot done in reading series this year, so I feel proud of that. Especially the Heartstone and Scythe series felt like an albatross or like a sword of Damocles for me, and I'm really glad that those are off the TBR so that I can focus on other things. And really, the Heroes of Olympus is the only one that I'm disappointed I didn't get to this year, and I already have a plan of how I'm gonna fix that. So I felt like this was a very productive reading year for series, even if it wasn't my best, especially in terms of series finales. So yeah, I think that that will do it for me. Definitely let me know what you thought about any of the books I talked about or any of the series I talked about. I've got all of the questions in the description. If you would like to do this tag, you are welcome to do so. And yeah, I think that that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!